Blue Wings. A Fairy Tale Adventure. Written by Patricia Shrigley. Here is the prologue. Happy listening. To read this book, you must forget all about your world. This tale doesn't take place in your world, nor could it. It unfolds in a hidden realm populated by people much smaller than you, yet their hearts are just as big inside their chests. And their problems don't shrink with their reduced size. If anything, their troubles swell to be even greater because of the awkward nature of their misguided world, and their smallness in it. The main culprit in this tale is a 12-year-old girl named Annabelle Blue. In her pixie home, it is whispered that Annabelle was born under a weeping willow tree on a night when there was no moon to ward away the flock of black butterflies that gathered to drink the nectar from her soul, sipping all the sweetness from her. Gossip held that when she was found under that tree, rain dripped down from the branches like tears, although no water fell from the sky. She was all alone, swaddled inside the blossom of a Venus flytrap, and screaming up a storm. She wasn't screaming because the carnivorous flower was devouring her. It was decapitated, and she looked quite snug. She was simply screaming as babes often do, but with much more gusto. For several years, the babe continued to scream. Only in sleep did her voice quiet to whimpers. The guardian who adopted her might have been tempted, more than once, to carry Annabelle into the mist of nothingness at the end of the world and leave her there, but the woman had secretly sacrificed too much to raise the babe who was not her own. So Annabelle was not abandoned in the mist, and she did grow up. By her 12th year, Annabelle has been accused of many things. Being amiable is not one of them, nor is being friendly, sociable, likable, agreeable or good-humored. At this point, I must be clear about something. Annabelle at 12 is not a bad girl, nor is that whispered about her, at least not very often, but Annabelle is a difficult girl, always asking questions, always arguing. She can create a quarrel from nothing but the echo of her words. In Annabelle's circle, pixies avoid her if they see her coming, unless they are feeling grumpy and in the mood for a good squabble. Annabelle's home is in the province of the pixies. It is one of 3 relatively circular territories whose borders meet where their lands press together. Picture a flower that grows only 3 big petals. The pixie province would be one of those petals. The fairy monarchy would be another, and the Merrow Empire the third. There is a much smaller central patch, like the center of a flower, which is surrounded by these 3 lands. It is considered common ground. This center is the meeting place where once a year, by tradition, representatives of the 3 territories gather to discuss the things that affect them all. It is the only time the inhabitants of the 3 lands communicate with each other. Because this common ground juts higher into the sky than all the surrounding land, it is called the pinnacle. It has a panoramic view of all 3 worlds fading away into the mist of nothingness that encircles the Tri-Kingdom. The Pixie Province is the lesser, and the least of the 3 territories. One could even say it is looked down upon. The most favored branch of the Tri-Kingdom is the fairy monarchy. The lucky inhabitants of that world are born with wings. They can fly like birds in the sky, seen and envied from the fringes of the 2 lesser lands by those who will never fly. And there is strong resentment when the fairies are so bold as to soar over those lands. Although fairy feet do not touch the ground, it is still considered a trespass. The third and middling territory is the watery Merrow Empire. Merrows are pixies born with gills. They can swim like fish and live under the water, if they so choose. They can also walk on land and breathe air in through their mouths. They are luckier than pixies because they can enjoy 2 very different ways of life, but they are not as fortunate as the fairies. Flying is prized above all other abilities. 12 years ago, the fairies built a high stone wall along their border, where that border touched pixie and Merrow soil. It was constructed with the sole purpose of keeping their neighbors, especially the lowly pixies, out. The Merrows must have thought the barrier a good idea, because they excavated a trough, and dammed and redirected the miasma river that flowed into their empire from the mist of nothingness. The deep rushing moat they created along their border effectively kept all the pixies out, but it didn't do a thing to bar the flying fairies, so the moat was a blatant insult to the pixies. The pixies built no wall and dug no moat. Their province was open to all visitors, not that there were many. The resentment the pixies felt at being excluded on both sides grew, until there was almost no contact between the three kingdoms, except when their representatives met coolly on the pinnacle. For 12 years, the wall has stood strong and the moat has flowed deep, and the three populations have gone about their own business with no regard for any territory but their own. This state of affairs might never have changed, except for a series of alarming events, and one lowly pixie. This is where we come back to Annabelle Blue. Although this tale truly begins before the fairy wall was built, it also begins here, when Annabelle is 12 and a half.